Queen Zarathis sat on her crystal throne, looking down at her military commanders. The throne room was massive, with walls that sparkled like diamonds and a ceiling so high it seemed to touch the stars themselves. She was not like humans at all. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with shimmering blue skin and 4 powerful arms, she was the ruler of the mighty Valorian Empire. Her empire was huge. 47 different star systems bowed to her command. Thousands of planets paid tribute to her power. Her ships could destroy entire worlds, and her soldiers had never known defeat. For over 300 years, the Valorians had been the strongest force in the galaxy. Today was different, though. Her top general, Kethvar, stood before her holding an old data pad. His 6 eyes looked worried as he cleared his throat. "My queen," he began, his voice echoing in the great hall. "Our scouts found something interesting near the outer rim. There's a small solar system with a species called humans. They live on several worlds, but their main planet is called Earth." Zarathis waved one of her hands dismissively. "Another. Primitive species, I assume. How long will it take to add them to our empire?" General Kethvar shifted uncomfortably. "That's just it, Your Majesty. We found some of their old records, stories about their warriors. The things they claim about human fighters are unusual." The queen leaned forward, her curiosity sparked. "What kind of stories?" Kethvar activated the datapad, and holographic text appeared in the air. "They speak of warriors who continued fighting even when badly hurt, soldiers who would charge into impossible battles to save complete strangers, fighters who somehow found strength beyond what their bodies should allow." The queen's laugh filled the throne room like the sound of breaking glass. "Impossible. Look at the scans of these creatures. They're tiny compared to us. They live less than 100 years while we live for thousands. Their weapons are simple metal and chemicals while ours bend space and time itself." She stood up, her 4 arms spreading wide. "These humans barely reach my chest in height. Their skin has no natural armor. They have only 2 arms instead of 4. How could such weak beings possibly be great warriors?" Another commander, Admiral Zexandra, stepped forward. "The records are quite detailed, my queen. They describe battles where humans fought against overwhelming odds, stories of individuals who saved thousands of lives by sacrificing themselves, tales of ordinary people who became heroes when their families were threatened." Zarathis walked to the great window of her throne room. Outside, she could see her mighty fleet of star destroyers floating in space like sleeping giants. Each ship could level a mountain. Her smallest fighter craft carried more firepower than entire human armies. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "These short-lived, soft-skinned creatures with primitive technology somehow produced legendary warriors? Warriors so great that other species still tell stories about them?" "That appears to be what the records suggest, Your Majesty," Kethvar replied carefully. The queen turned back to face her commanders. "I've lived for over 800 years. I've seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. Every species tells tales of their great heroes to make themselves feel important. These human stories are clearly made up to scare their enemies." She began pacing, her heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. "Think about it logically. If humans were truly great warriors, why haven't they conquered other worlds? Why do they still fight among themselves instead of expanding their empire? Great warriors build great empires, and these humans have barely left their own solar system." General Kethvar nodded slowly. "Your reasoning is sound, my queen. Their technology scans show they still use chemical rockets for space travel. Their weapons fire simple projectiles. Their ships are made of basic metals and alloys." "Exactly," Zarathis said, a smile spreading across her face. "These humans will make an excellent training exercise for our newer officers. Their worlds are probably rich in resources we can use, and their population can serve our empire once they surrender." Admiral Zexandra brought up a holographic display showing the human solar system. "Our intelligence suggests they have settlements on multiple worlds. The main planet Earth has about 8 billion inhabitants. There are smaller colonies on a planet called Mars and several moons." The queen studied the display with interest. 8 billion? That's quite a large population for such a small system. They'll make useful workers once we integrate them into our empire. How large a fleet should we send, Your Majesty? Asked General Kethvar. Zarathis considered for a moment. The third fleet should be more than enough. That's 50 star destroyers, 200 cruisers, and 1,000 fighter craft. Actually, that might be too much. We don't want to completely destroy their infrastructure. The third fleet is currently commanded by Admiral Zexandra, Kethvar noted. Perfect, the Queen said. Zexandra, you'll lead this mission. Consider it a training operation. Your objectives are simple. Secure surrender from all human settlements. Establish control points on their major worlds and begin resource evaluation. Admiral Zexandra bowed deeply. It will be done, my Queen. How long do you estimate this campaign should take? 2 weeks? Perhaps 3 at most, Zarathis replied, confidently. Once they see our superior firepower, they'll surrender immediately. Most species do. It's the logical choice when facing overwhelming force. As the commanders prepared to leave, an old figure entered the throne room. Seer Voth was ancient even by Valorian standards, having lived for over 2,000 years. His role was to advise the royal family using the old wisdom of their people. My Queen, Voth said, his voice crackling with age, I've heard talk of this human campaign. I urge caution. Zarathis sighed. She respected the old seer, but his warnings were often based on superstition rather than facts. What concerns you, old friend? There's an old saying among our people, Voth continued. Beware the fire that burns brightest before it dies. Some flames, when cornered, become infernos that consume everything around them. The Queen frowned. You're speaking in riddles again, Voth. What does this have to do with the humans? Sometimes the smallest creatures fight the hardest when they have everything to lose, the seer replied. I've studied the old texts. There are patterns in how different species behave when threatened with extinction. The humans won't face extinction, Zarathis said firmly. We're not destroyers, we're builders of empire. They'll become part of something greater than themselves. Voth nodded slowly, but his expression remained troubled. I hope you're right, my Queen. But remember, a cornered animal is often more dangerous than a confident predator. After the seer left, Zarathis stood alone in her throne room. Outside the window, stars twinkled in the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, in a small yellow star system, lived the humans. In a few months, they would be part of her empire. She thought about their supposed legendary warriors, stories of humans who fought beyond their physical limits, tales of sacrifice and heroism that seemed too fantastic to be real. It was impossible. Her own species were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had the best technology, the strongest bodies, and the most advanced tactics. How could a species that lived such short lives and had such fragile bodies possibly produce great warriors? It defied all logic and experience. The Queen made her final decision. The Third Fleet would depart within the week. The human worlds would surrender quickly, and their population would join the growing Valorian Empire. It would be a simple, clean conquest that would add valuable resources and workers to her domain. As she walked back to her throne, Zarathis felt completely confident in her assessment. The legendary human warriors were nothing more than stories told by a primitive species trying to make themselves seem important. Reality would prove very different from their fantasies. The conquest would begin soon, and it would be over before the humans even understood what was happening to them. 3 months had passed since Queen Zarathis ordered the conquest of the human worlds. Admiral Zexandra stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as the massive Valorian fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The sight was truly impressive. 50 star destroyers hung in space like sleeping metal giants, each one capable of destroying entire cities. Behind them, hundreds of smaller ships formed perfect battle formations. The Admiral's 4 eyes studied the sensor readings with growing interest. The human solar system was busier than expected. Ships moved between planets like tiny insects carrying cargo and passengers. Space stations orbited several worlds, and the third planet from the Sun glowed with the lights of billions of inhabitants. Begin. Scanning all frequencies. Admiral Zexandra commanded her communications officer. Let's see what these humans have to say. The communications array activated, and immediately the bridge filled with dozens of different signals, human voices speaking in various languages, data transmissions between their ships, and what appeared to be entertainment broadcasts from their home world. They seem unaware of our presence, reported the sensor operator. No change in their traffic patterns or communications. Admiral Zexandra nodded. This was typical. Most species needed time to detect approaching fleets, especially ones using advanced stealth technology. She decided to make their presence known. Open a channel to all human frequencies, she ordered. Broadcast on every wavelength they use. The communication officer worked quickly, and within moments the Admiral's voice was being transmitted throughout the human solar system. She spoke in the common galactic language, which their translation computers would easily convert to human speech. Attention inhabitants of the Sol system, her voice boomed across space. I am Admiral Zexandra of the Valorian Empire. Your worlds are now under our protection. Cease all military activities and prepare for peaceful integration into our empire. Surrender immediately, and no harm will come to your population. The Admiral expected the usual response. Most species either surrendered right away or spent hours trying to negotiate. Some begged for mercy. Others threatened retaliation with weapons they didn't possess. But the human response was different. After only a few minutes, a calm human voice replied, Message received and understood. We hear you clearly. We're ready. Admiral Zexandra frowned. That was it? No demands for proof of their power, no requests for negotiation time, no desperate threats or pleas for mercy. Just a simple acknowledgement that they were ready? Ready for what? The Admiral asked, genuinely confused. Ready for whatever comes next, the human voice replied. The communications officer looked puzzled. Admiral, this is unusual. Most species ask questions. They want to know our demands, our intentions, our timeline. Indeed, Admiral Zexandra agreed. Begin detailed scans of their defensive positions. Let's see what they're actually ready for. The sensor reports that came back were surprising. Human ships throughout the system weren't fleeing to safety or forming defensive lines around their major worlds. Instead, they seemed to be moving into positions that made no tactical sense. Small mining vessels moved toward the Valorian fleet. Cargo ships changed course to intercept projected invasion routes. Even civilian transports seemed to be positioning themselves strategically. Are they planning to attack us with mining equipment and cargo haulers? Asked the tactical officer, sounding almost amused. It appears so, Admiral Zexandra replied. Perhaps they don't understand the power difference between our technologies. She decided to demonstrate that power with a small show of force. Target the mining station at coordinate 77 Mark 12. It's isolated from major population centers. We'll disable it quickly to show them what resistance will cost. The targeted station was a small asteroid mining facility with perhaps 50 workers. It would be an easy target that would demonstrate Valorian superiority without causing major casualties. Firing solution locked, reported the weapons officer. Fire, Admiral Zexandra commanded. Energy beams lanced out from the Valorian ships, striking the mining station's power systems and defensive shields. The small station shuddered under the impact but didn't explode. The Admiral had ordered precise shots to disable rather than destroy. What happened next shocked everyone on the bridge. Instead of surrendering or evacuating, the miners began converting their industrial equipment into weapons. Mining charges became explosive missiles. Ore processing facilities were turned into makeshift cannon. Heavy machinery was modified to launch chunks of raw metal at incredible speeds. They're fighting back, the sensor operator reported in disbelief. A mining station with 50 people is actually fighting our entire fleet. The miners' resistance was hopeless, of course. Their improvised weapons couldn't penetrate Valorian shields, but they kept firing anyway. When their main systems failed, they suited up and went outside to continue the fight in the vacuum of space. Admiral Zexandra watched in fascination as a lone figure in a simple work suit maneuvered a cargo hauler toward one of her destroyers. The small ship was loaded with mining explosives and moving on a collision course. Should we destroy the cargo ship, Admiral? Asked the weapons officer. No. Admiral Zexandra replied. Let's see what he does. The cargo hauler pilot was clearly running out of oxygen. His suit's life support could only last so long in space. Any rational being would turn back or surrender. Instead, the pilot accelerated toward the Valorian destroyer. His voice crackled over the communication system, weak but determined. This is for everyone who dreams of tomorrow, he said simply. The cargo hauler struck the destroyer's engine section and exploded. The blast was enormous, fueled by mining charges and refined ore. The Valorian ship lurched sideways, its engines damaged and its shields flickering. Admiral Zexandra stared at the tactical display in shock. A single human in a cargo ship had just damaged one of her most powerful vessels. Not because he had superior weapons or technology, but because he was willing to trade his life for that attack. Admiral, her communications officer said quietly, we're receiving a transmission from the mining station. Put it through. An older human voice, crackling with static from damaged equipment, spoke clearly. We know you can destroy us. We know we can't win. But we also know that freedom isn't something you give away. If you want this station, you'll have to take it piece by piece. The transmission cut off. Moments later, the mining station exploded in a brilliant flash. The miners had destroyed their own facility rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Admiral Zexandra stood silently on her bridge, trying to process what she had just witnessed. In all her years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. These humans had fought a hopeless battle against impossible odds, and when defeat was certain, they had chosen destruction over surrender. Admiral, the tactical officer, reported, we're detecting similar activities throughout the system. Human ships are moving to intercept our forces. Their space stations are powering up weapons that shouldn't be able to harm our shields. And the civilian populations? That's the strange part. They're not evacuating. Long-range scans show them organizing into defensive positions. Even their children and elderly seem to be preparing for some kind of resistance. Admiral Zexandra felt a chill run through her body. This wasn't how conquests were supposed to work. Rational species surrendered when facing overwhelming force. They preserved their lives and adapted to new circumstances. They didn't throw themselves into hopeless battles. Continue monitoring all human activities, she ordered, and send a priority message to Queen Zarathis. Tell her the humans are unusual. As her fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, Admiral Zexandra couldn't shake the image of that lone cargo pilot. His final words echoed in her mind. This is for everyone who dreams of tomorrow. What kind of species produced people willing to die for the dreams of others? What drove them to fight when victory was impossible? For the first time in her military career, Admiral Zexandra began to wonder if the Valorian Empire had underestimated their enemy. The human resistance was just beginning, and already it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Admiral Zexandra had been confident when her fleet reached Mars. The red planet looked peaceful from space, with its domed cities and terraforming stations glowing softly against the rusty landscape. Intelligence reports showed it had only 2 million human inhabitants spread across dozens of settlements. It should have been an easy conquest. That was 3 days ago. Now, as she stood on her bridge looking at the tactical display, Admiral Zexandra felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. Report on the New Geneva colony, she ordered her tactical officer. The young Valorian's voice carried a note of confusion that was becoming all too familiar. The settlement is surrounded, Admiral. Our ground forces have them completely cut off, but they refuse to surrender. How many defenders? That's the problem, Admiral. Everyone is defending. The doctors, the farmers, the teachers, even the children are carrying messages between fighting positions. We count approximately 8,000 civilians, and every single one seems to be involved in the resistance somehow. Admiral Zexandra rubbed her forehead with 2 of her 4 hands. This was supposed to be simple. Overwhelming force, quick surrender, peaceful integration. Instead, every human settlement fought like their lives depended on it, which, she was beginning to realize, they believed it did. What about the medical facility we surrounded yesterday? The tactical officer's expression grew even more puzzled. That's where things get truly strange, Admiral. There's an elderly human female inside. She's confined to a mobility chair and appears to be nearly 90 years old by their standards. One old woman? Why haven't our troops simply walked in and secured the facility? Because she won't leave, Admiral. Our soldiers offered to relocate her to safety, but she refused. She says the medical facility is her home and she's not going anywhere. Admiral Zexandra felt a headache forming behind her eyes. So we have an entire regiment of our finest soldiers being held up by one old woman in a wheelchair? It's more complicated than that, the officer replied carefully. Our intelligence suggests she's been modifying the medical equipment somehow. Energy readings from the facility are unusual. Before the Admiral could respond, her communications officer spoke up urgently. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the facility. The elderly human wants to speak with you directly. Put her through. The main screen flickered, and Admiral Zexandra found herself looking at a frail human woman. Her hair was completely white, her face lined with age, and she sat in a chair that appeared to help her move around. But her eyes were sharp and clear, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. Good morning, Admiral, the old woman said politely. My name is Eleanor, and I understand you want me to leave my home. Admiral Zexandra was taken aback by the woman's calm demeanor. That's correct. We're trying to secure this facility for medical use by our occupation forces. You'll be relocated to a comfortable facility where you can receive proper care. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the offer, I really do. But you see, I've lived in this place for 15 years. I helped build the community here. I watched children grow up, saw families start new lives on Mars. This isn't just a building to me. It's where I belong. You're being unreasonable, Admiral Zexandra said, though not unkindly. You're one person against thousands of soldiers. You cannot possibly win this standoff. The old woman smiled, and something in that smile made the Admiral feel uncomfortable. Win? Oh dear, I'm not trying to win anything. I'm just trying to make a point. Which is? That some things are more important than breathing, Eleanor replied simply. I've lived long enough to see humanity reach for the stars. I've seen us build homes on dead worlds and bring life to empty spaces. I won't live to see us bow down to anyone, no matter how powerful they think they are. Admiral Zexandra felt a chill run down her spine. Are you threatening us? Not threatening, Eleanor said gently. Just explaining. You see, I've been using my medical equipment to do some modifications. Nothing fancy, just rerouting some power systems, adjusting some chemical processes. If your soldiers try to take this facility by force, well, let's just say it'll be quite an explosive situation. The Admiral stared at the screen in disbelief. You're willing to die to stop us from using one medical facility? I'm willing to die to show you that humanity doesn't surrender, Eleanor replied. Every person you conquer, every world you take, they need to understand that we fought for every inch, that we never gave up even when the odds were impossible. The transmission cut off abruptly. Minutes later, Admiral Zexandra watched in horror as half of New Geneva Colony disappeared in a massive explosion. The medical facility, the surrounding buildings, and a Valorian command post all vanished in a brilliant flash of light. Eleanor had kept her word. The Admiral sank into her command chair, staring at the tactical display. One elderly woman, barely able to walk, had just inflicted more damage on her forces than entire planetary armies usually managed. Admiral, her communications officer said quietly, we're receiving reports from across the planet. Similar incidents are occurring at multiple locations. What kind of incidents? Humans who refuse evacuation orders. Families who fight together instead of surrendering. Civilians who destroy their own infrastructure rather than let us use it. And the officer paused, clearly struggling with what he was seeing. Parents who position themselves between our soldiers and their children even when offered safe passage. Admiral Zexandra closed her eyes. In one settlement, she had watched a human family face impossible odds. The parents, when offered the chance to live as subjects of the Empire, had looked her soldiers in the eye and said something that haunted her. Freedom isn't something you give up. It's something you die for. They had meant it. How are our casualty? Reports, she asked. Higher than any previous campaign, the tactical officer replied grimly. Not because the humans have superior weapons, but because they fight like what? Like every battle is the most important battle in the universe, he finished. Admiral Zexandra opened her eyes and looked around her bridge. Her officers, all seasoned veterans of dozens of campaigns, looked shaken. They had never encountered anything like this. Admiral, the communications officer spoke up again. Queen Zarathis is requesting an immediate report on our progress. The Admiral took a deep breath. How could she explain this to the Queen? How could she describe what they were witnessing? Tell Her Majesty that the humans are unexpected, she said finally. They don't fight like any species we've encountered before. How so, Admiral? Admiral Zexandra thought about Eleanor, sitting calmly in her chair, choosing death over submission. She thought about the mining station workers who had fought in the vacuum of space. She thought about families who stood together against impossible odds and parents who shielded their children, even when offered mercy. They fight like they have nothing to lose and everything to protect, she said quietly. And I'm beginning to think those old legends about human warriors might not be legends at all. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of that statement. Outside the ship's windows, Mars continued to burn. But the humans continued to fight. Queen Zarathis had never left her throne world during a military campaign before. For 800 years she had ruled from her crystal palace while her generals conquered distant worlds. But Admiral Zexandra's reports from the human system were so unusual that the Queen felt compelled to see for herself what was happening. Her personal flagship was the most advanced vessel in the Valorian fleet, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shielded by technology that bent space itself. It was a monument to Valorian power. Yet as she approached Earth, Queen Zarathis felt strangely unsettled. Show me the current situation, she commanded. Her bridge crew. The main display lit up with tactical information that made the Queen's four eyes widen in surprise. Earth's orbital defenses had been completely overwhelmed. Human ships floated as burning wreckage around their home world. Planet's major cities showed clear signs of bombardment. By all logic, the humans should have surrendered by now. Why is the resistance continuing? The Queen asked. Her intelligence officer, a veteran of 50 campaigns, shook his head in confusion. Majesty, we've never seen anything like this. Most species surrender when they lose their orbital defenses. These humans have implemented something they call Protocol 7, which is complete civilian evacuation to underground shelters while every able-bodied adult joins surface resistance. They're not trying to win anymore, Majesty. They're just trying to make us pay the highest price possible for every step forward. Queen Zarathis studied the reports flowing across her screen. Human resistance fighters were using the ruins of their own cities as cover. They had turned their capital into a maze of defensive positions, using destroyed buildings and collapsed highways as fortifications. Take us down to the surface, she ordered. I want to see these legendary human warriors for myself. Her security chief immediately protested. Majesty, that's extremely dangerous. The humans have shown they're willing to attack any target regardless of the odds. Then we'll show them overwhelming force, the Queen replied. Deploy a full security regiment. I want to walk through their capital and see what kind of creatures fight so desperately for a lost cause. 20 minutes later, Queen Zarathis stepped onto the broken streets of what had once been New York City. The devastation was incredible. Massive skyscrapers lay toppled across wide avenues. Smoke rose from countless fires, and the air itself seemed to carry the weight of destruction. Yet somehow, impossibly, the humans were still fighting. Her security detail moved in perfect formation around her, their advanced armor and energy weapons ready for any threat. They had been walking for only 10 minutes when they spotted their target. In the rubble of what had once been a children's hospital, a lone human figure was carefully moving through the debris. The Queen's enhanced vision showed her a man in a torn uniform, his left arm clearly broken and blood seeping through makeshift bandages. He should have been seeking medical attention or hiding from the Valorian patrols. Instead, he was carrying a small human child. Surround him, Queen Zarathis ordered quietly. Her soldiers moved like shadows, using their advanced technology to approach silently. Within moments, they had the human completely surrounded, with no possible escape route. The man looked up from the child he was carrying and saw the queen approaching. He showed no fear, no surprise, no desperation. He simply continued checking the little girl's pulse with steady hands. Queen Zarathis had expected to find a savage warrior, a fierce fighter driven mad by desperation. Instead, she found someone who looked more like a caretaker than a soldier. "You are the human warrior?" she asked, her voice echoing strangely in the ruined street. The man looked up at her towering form, taking in her 4 arms and imposing presence. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "I'm a human being," he said simply, "and this little girl needs a doctor." The queen felt taken aback by his directness. Most beings, when confronted by her presence, either cowered in fear or blustered with false bravado. This human did neither. "Your resistance is pointless," she told him. "Your orbital defenses are destroyed, your armies are scattered, your government has fled underground. Why do you continue to fight?" The man gently adjusted his hold on the unconscious child. "Because she's 7 years old and she wants to be a teacher when she grows up. Because her parents died getting other kids to safety. Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light." Queen Zarathis stared at him in confusion. "Stand between what?" "Between people who hurt children and children who need protection," the man replied. "Between those who take freedom and those who deserve to be free." The queen found herself studying the child in his arms. She looked so small, so fragile. Her clothes were torn and dirty and she was clearly injured, yet this man was risking his life to save her. "I could offer you terms," the queen said suddenly. "Surrender now, help me get this child to medical care, and I'll guarantee both your safety." The man considered this for a moment, then shook his head. "I've seen what happens to people who trust your guarantees, but I'll make you a deal. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. Let me get this girl to the medical station 6 blocks from here," the man said. "Make sure she gets the help she needs. After that, I'll come back and we can finish this conversation." Queen Zarathis felt her soldiers tense around her. The suggestion was absurd. No prisoner dictated terms to the Valorian Empire. But something in the man's eyes made her curious. "You would actually return?" she asked. "I give you my word." The queen had lived for centuries and ruled billions of beings. She had learned to read deception in dozens of species. Yet when she looked at this battered human, carrying an injured child, she saw only sincerity. "Very well," she said. "My soldiers will escort you to the medical station. But if you try to escape, I won't." Queen Zarathis watched through her soldiers' helmet cameras as the man carefully carried the child through 6 blocks of dangerous rubble. He moved slowly, protecting her from falling debris and avoiding areas where fighting continued. When they reached the medical station, he spent several minutes talking to the doctors, making sure they understood the child's injuries. Then, true to his word, he walked back. "Why?" the queen asked when he stood before her again, defenseless and alone. "Because I told you I would," he replied. "No, I mean, why risk your life for one child? You could have escaped. You could have saved yourself." The man looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Because that's what it means to be human. We protect the people who can't protect themselves. We keep our promises even when it costs us everything. We stand up to bullies, even when the bullies are bigger than us." For the first time in her long life, Queen Zarathis began to understand something that had been missing from all her military reports. This wasn't about technology or tactics or strategic advantage. This was about something her species had forgotten in their centuries of conquest. This was about love. The human warrior standing before her wasn't fighting for glory or conquest or even survival. He was fighting because he loved that little girl enough to die for her. He loved the idea of her growing up to be a teacher. He loved the possibility of tomorrow being better than today. Queen Zarathis looked around at the ruined city, at her soldiers with their advanced weapons, at this one human who refused to surrender. And for the first time in 800 years, she wondered if her empire had been making a terrible mistake. Queen Zarathis sat alone in her private chambers aboard her flagship, surrounded by thousands of reports that painted an impossible picture. For 3 days, she had been studying every combat analysis, every prisoner interview, every behavioral assessment from the human campaign. The numbers told a story that defied everything she thought she knew about warfare. Her tactical computer displayed the statistics in cold, clinical detail. Human forces had inflicted casualty rates that should have been impossible given their primitive technology. More puzzling was how they achieved these results. Not through superior weapons or advanced tactics, but through something her military scientists couldn't quantify. They called it the human factor. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to her chambers. "Come in," she said without looking up from her reports. Admiral Zexandra entered, her forearms carrying yet another stack of incident reports. The admiral looked exhausted, her usually pristine uniform showing signs of the prolonged campaign. "Your Majesty," she began carefully, "I need to discuss our situation with complete honesty." Queen Zarathus gestured to a chair across from her. "Speak freely, old friend." Admiral Zexandra sat down heavily. "We can still win this war. Our technology is superior, our ships are more powerful, and we have greater numbers. But victory will require something we've never had to do before, which is complete annihilation. Every human settlement, every ship, every person. They will never submit, Majesty. They will never stop fighting as long as a single one of them draws breath." The Queen set down her data pad and looked directly at her most trusted admiral. "And what would that make us?" "I don't understand, Majesty. If we destroy an entire species because they refuse to bow to us, what does that make us?" Queen Zarathus stood and walked to the great window of her chambers. Outside, Earth hung in space like a blue and white jewel, beautiful even in its current state of siege. "Think about what we've witnessed," the Queen continued. "The cargo pilot who sacrificed himself to damage our destroyer, the elderly woman who chose death over surrender, the man who kept his word even when it meant facing certain death. What were they all fighting for?" Admiral Zexandra considered the question carefully. "Their freedom, I suppose." "No," the Queen said softly. "They were fighting for each other." The pilot died thinking about everyone who would dream of tomorrow. The old woman sacrificed herself to send a message that some things matter more than survival. The man risked everything to save one injured child. The admiral frowned. "I'm not sure I understand the distinction, Majesty." Queen Zarathus turned back to face her friend. "We fight to conquer. They fight to protect. We fight for ourselves. They fight for others. We've spent centuries building an empire, but we've forgotten what empires are supposed to protect." A memory surfaced in the Queen's mind. An ancient Valorian prophet named Seer Voth had warned her about flames that become infernos when cornered. At the time she had dismissed his words as the rambling of an old mystic. Now she understood what he had been trying to tell her. Humans didn't become dangerous because they were cornered. They became dangerous because they had something worth protecting. "Majesty," Admiral Zexandra said quietly, "what are you suggesting?" Before the Queen could answer, her communications officer's voice echoed through the chamber. "Your Majesty, we're receiving a transmission from the human resistance. They're requesting to speak with you directly." Queen Zarathus exchanged glances with Admiral Zexandra. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of an older human woman with silver hair and tired eyes. Behind her, the Queen could see what appeared to be an underground command center filled with people working frantically at primitive computers. "Your Majesty," the woman began, her voice steady despite the obvious stress of her situation. "I'm the current coordinator of Earth's defense. I understand you wanted to see what human warriors look like." "I have seen enough," Queen Zarathus replied. "Then you know we'll never surrender," the woman continued. "You can destroy our cities, sink our ships, and hunt us through every tunnel and cave on this planet, but we'll never stop fighting. The question is, how many of your people are you willing to sacrifice to prove a point?" The Queen felt a strange admiration for this human's directness. "And how many of your people are you willing to sacrifice for your freedom?" "All of us, if necessary," the woman replied without hesitation. But I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope you're wise enough to understand what you've discovered here, which is that some things are more important than winning, some principles are worth dying for, and sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away from a fight you know you can win. The transmission ended, leaving Queen Zarathis staring at a blank screen. She thought about her 800 years of life, about the 47 star systems that bowed to her empire, about the billions of beings who called her their ruler. She had built the greatest military force in the galaxy, conquered worlds beyond counting, and established an empire that would last for millennia. But what had she protected? What had she preserved? What would her legacy be? "Admiral," she said, finally, "recall all our forces." "Majesty, you heard me. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. We're leaving human space immediately." Admiral Zexandra stood up in shock, but Majesty, we're on the verge of victory. One final push and Earth will fall. "Will it?" Queen Zarathis asked. "Or will we simply create more martyrs, more legends, more stories of humans who chose death over submission?" She walked back to her window and looked down at Earth one more time. "I came here expecting to conquer warriors of legend. Instead, I found something far more dangerous." "What could be more dangerous than legendary warriors?" "People worth becoming legends for," the Queen replied. "Every human who dies fighting us becomes a story. Every sacrifice becomes an inspiration. Every act of defiance becomes a beacon for others to follow." Queen Zarathis turned away from the window and faced her admiral directly. "Issue the recall order. All Valorian forces are to withdraw from human space immediately. Furthermore, I'm declaring this entire star system off-limits to Valorian expansion. The Council will demand an explanation, Majesty. Tell them we encountered a species that taught us something we had forgotten. Tell them we learned the difference between ruling through fear and leading through respect. Tell them we discovered that true strength isn't about what you can destroy, but about what you choose to protect." Hours later, as the massive Valorian fleet prepared to leave the Sol system, Queen Zarathis composed a personal message to the human resistance. "To the defenders of Earth," she began, "your species has shown mine something we had lost in our centuries of conquest. You fight not for glory or empire, but for love. You sacrifice not for personal gain, but for the hope of tomorrow. You have earned something we have never given to any species, our respect." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "We came here believing you were legends. We leave knowing that you are something far more important. You are examples of what we could become if we remembered why empires should exist in the first place. Not to conquer, but to protect. Not to rule, but to serve." The message was transmitted as the last Valorian ship left human space. Years later, when other alien species asked Queen Zarathis about the humans, she no longer laughed. Instead, she spoke with deep respect about the warriors who taught her. Empire, the true meaning of strength. They are legends, she would say, not because of what they can destroy, but because of what they choose to protect. And perhaps, if we're fortunate, they will teach the rest of the galaxy what it truly means to be civilized. The Valorian Empire became humanity's first alien ally, having learned that the greatest warriors are those who know what's worth fighting for.